All right, I guess we're live. Welcome to Air Church. I'm your host, Jack, and we're going to be going through the Gospel of John in the coming weeks. I'm just so glad that you were able to join us today. We're going to begin very shortly, but what is Air Church? You may be wondering. Well, this is a channel where I try to make the Bible accessible to people. Especially at this time where, when we are stuck at home, maybe there are things, we have stopped, our life has stopped in our tracks, and maybe we have time to think about some more serious things in our life. We have to ask some more serious questions. And maybe if you're wondering if there's a God and who are we, where did we come from, where are we heading? Well, hopefully, the Bible will provide some extremely important answers so that we can, move on with our lives. So anyway, this will not be very serious. I'm just trying to make it very light and approachable. If you've never read the Bible, well, I hope that you can read it with us today. If you don't have a Bible with you, that's okay, because I will show you the passages on the screen. So you don't have to worry about that either. Well, what is the Bible, actually? You may be wondering, wow, what is that? Sounds very serious. Well, and it is. But at the same time, the Bible just means the book or the books, okay? It's a collection of books. The Bible was written over 2,000 years. There are around 66 books in the collection, in the Bible books, and different types of writings, right? We have kind of poetry, we have historical narrative, we have the life of Jesus, and then we have some letters as well. So I think you might find it very interesting. So if you're new to our channel, make sure you subscribe, you connect with the channel so that you'll be able to get notifications. I'm welcoming anybody who's watching these right now. Say hi in the chat box if you're here. And I would like to also know where you're connecting from. It would be interesting to see if people are watching it from various parts of the world. Well, if you were with us last time, you know that we started to look at the Gospel of John. And John was the closest friend that Jesus had during his earthly ministry. He followed Jesus for his 3.5 years as Jesus was teaching and doing all kinds of miracles. And he also, John told us the story, basically. He abridged it so that it's all in a short summary for us. It's easy to read. It has a lot of interesting episodes in there. So I would encourage you to read the Gospel of John on your own. But today, we're going to go into the second chapter of the Gospel of John. Last week, we looked at the first chapter. Remember? What did we talk about last week? Well, if you haven't watched it, after this episode, I would encourage you to go back and rewatch the first episode. But we talked about God being the creator of the universe, this amazing life-giving spirit that not only created the universe, but God communicates. He speaks. He speaks through his word. And then that word became a man, and he lived among us. He lived, he taught, people saw him, people could touch him, people could ask him questions, and they could observe him. And everything that Jesus did was to show us who he was, that he was the Son of God. He was the promised Messiah who would save everyone from their sins, right? So today we'll continue this idea because, there are a lot of ideas out there about who Jesus is. Some people think he was just a moral teacher. Some people think he was a wise man. Some people think maybe he was, he didn't even exist, right? So people have different opinions. But today we'll just look at what the Bible teaches us about Jesus. I think it's really important that we let the Bible speak for itself, right? Okay, so and by the way, I try to accompany each episode of this Bible for Beginners with a worksheet that you can download. I will make it available later as a PDF. You can download it and work on your own. Or if you want to even work with a couple of your friends on the same idea, feel free to use these worksheets, download them, print them out, and maybe you can even start your own Bible study by using these materials. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at the second chapter of the Gospel of John. All right. So as you can see, I'm using this website called Bible Gateway. Any Bible online is fine. I am also using New International Version. There are many versions there, but because I want to keep things rather simple, and I hope that some of you may be learning English, I'm trying to keep the translation that I chose tends to be maybe using a more accessible, easy language to follow, okay? But just remember that we are looking at the translation, okay? So when Christians say that the Bible is inspired, they don't mean to say that this translation is inspired, okay? It's the original manuscripts that were given to us. They are inspired. And the translations are just our ways of trying to understand best that we can in our modern language what those originals are teaching us. All right. So dive in with me today as we look at John chapter 2. And as you can see, the heading, Jesus changes water into wine. Wow, exciting. Okay. However, just keep in mind that the titles of chapters and headings and the numbering of verses, all that stuff came later. It is not the part of the original inspired manuscripts. It is just to help us find our way around the Bible. Okay? So even before we start, let me just introduce you to this worksheet, which you can download later. All right. So in the last study, let's read it together, guys. In the last study, we saw that Jesus was the Son of God, right? He came from God and he was God. He was the Word in the flesh, in a human form. When people saw Jesus do amazing things, they knew that he was not just an ordinary man, right? He was doing all kinds of amazing things. They thought this man, Jesus, must come from God because an ordinary man can't do these kinds of things. And what was he doing? Well, he was healing people who were born blind. He was healing paralytics, people who could not move. He was healing, even he was raising the dead, all right? So I hope if you stick with us to the rest of the studies, you will find some amazing things that Jesus did. So their thinking was right. Jesus was not just an ordinary man. And if you were to go back to chapter 1 and read John 1:1, it says that he was God, right? The Word was with God and the Word was God. But in this study, we will also show how Jesus was also the Son of Man. Okay? So he is God, but at the same time, he is a Son of Man. All right? So when people talked about Jesus, they called him the Son of God because they knew he was not just an ordinary person. But when Jesus talked about himself, he often called himself the Son of Man because he should be human. Like, he has to be human to help other people and to connect with us on our level, right? If he was some kind of a superhuman or another creature, well, it would be difficult to connect to humans like you and I, people who have problems, people who get hungry, people who are worried about tomorrow, don't know if they're going to have a job tomorrow or not, people who are worried about war, people who are thinking about, will I have a house someday? Will I have a roof over my head? And people who are getting sick and dying, So this is why Jesus really liked this name, Son of Man, because he identified himself with humanity, with you and I, okay? So Jesus was very human, but he was also the Son of God. So John 2, this chapter, will show us that Jesus was both. He was the Son of God, and he was also the Son of Man. And by the way, the special phrase, Son of Man, had an additional meaning, because long time before Jesus came, there were prophets, And one of the prophets, whose name was Daniel, talked about the Son of Man, whose kingdom would never end, would be eternal kingdom. And every Jewish person would know this name. When Jesus used the name Son of Man, everybody knew, oh, he is talking about the prophet Daniel and the prophecy that he was giving us about the man who would come and he would rule forever. And how can a man rule forever? Well, only a God-man can rule forever, right? Because he doesn't die. He's God. Well, before we even jump into the study, I think I would help you with some vocabulary. We're going to encounter some new words, maybe some words that you don't really know. So we will come to a town called Cana, and it was just a town in the north part of Israel, where near the place where Jesus grew up. Okay, and it was in the area of Galilee. That's our second word. And it was a province, a small part of Israel. And the thing about that province was that people didn't think very highly of Galilee. You know, it wasn't a place where a lot of educated and very influential people lived. It was mostly farming community, and many people looked down on Galilee. They said, oh, can anything good come from that place? People were surprised. And I think many people who were very proud maybe were surprised that, oh, Jesus is from there. Oh, how can he be from there? Okay, so it was a lower class, poor area, and often uneducated. Just keep that in mind. Okay, and then there will be a word called disciples. Disciples just means followers, people who are following Jesus and they're learning from him. Okay. Then we will have a wedding as well. So when you think of a wedding, we have a bride and a bridegroom. So the bridegroom is the man who is getting married at the wedding, obviously, and the bride he's getting married to her, and so it's you will see both. There will be a miraculous sign. Okay, so what is a miracle? Miracle is something amazing that happens that people cannot do on their own. So, for example, when Jesus walked on water, this was considered a miracle, and because people cannot walk on water normally, right? So here's another miraculous sign. And glory. What's this word glory? Well, glory comes after you do something wonderful, okay? And everybody thinks, oh, you're such a great guy, okay? Maybe they applaud you and they say, okay, awesome, you did a great job. Well, that's glory, okay? There's a city called Capernaum, another town in the north part of Israel. And there will be a mentioning of a Passover. Passover was a special holiday and a feast in the Jewish calendar. So it was a special religious festival that the Jewish people celebrated every year, okay? So just keep that in mind. And of course, we're talking about the temple as well. There's going to be a talk of the temple. And the temple was a special place, especially in the Jewish culture, where a lot of religious activities were taking place, okay? And another word for a temple is a place where God dwells, where God lives in the temple, okay? And finally, we have the word scripture, which is just a fancy word for the writings of God's word that were written, were referred to as scripture. All right, so I hope that helps. And we can go in and actually start reading. And then we'll just try to compare what happened in the first chapter and in the second chapter. All right, guys. So on the third day, okay, so this is the third day after what we were studying last time. And it's a third day since we had our last stream. Isn't that cool? Okay, so on the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." Okay, so let's stop here and let me just tell you a little bit more information about these weddings. Because, now, guys, because of this physical isolation and distancing that we have to endure temporarily. Many people canceled their weddings. They decided to get married maybe next year or something. They said, let's put this off. Why? Because a wedding is a very social event. A lot of people come to the wedding, and it's a time of rejoicing, right? So also in that particular culture, weddings were huge. They would last for weeks, and a lot of people would come, not just family, but relatives and people from the same village, maybe even people from other towns, because, they wanted to celebrate that together. So it was a big event. A lot of people were there, and also Jesus and his disciples were invited as well. And then what happened? When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." And then Jesus answered, "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Wow, so just imagine these stone cisterns, the containers for water. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Hey, everybody brings out the choice wine first and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." So what Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs which he revealed, through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Okay, after this he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples, and there they stayed for a few days. All right, so let's see again. Let's kind of analyze what happened here, right? So first of all, maybe it's the second or third day of the wedding and everybody's having a great time. And in chapter 3, what do we find? In verse 3, we see the wine was gone. And Jesus' mother said to him, "Oh, they have no more wine." And then some people criticize Jesus for using this word. Some people say, "Oh, Jesus was so harsh. He's calling his own mother woman. Hey, woman." Okay? But those people don't realize that this term at the time in that particular culture was a very honorable way of addressing a woman. Okay? So to call a woman in those days was very, very honorable. And actually, so it's, that kind of criticism is completely based on lack of knowledge. So Jesus addresses his mother saying, very politely. And Jesus says, "My hour has not yet come." So what he's saying is that my time, maybe to start my ministry or to reveal my who I am, is not yet, okay? But the mother says, but anyway, he's going to do it. Why? Well, his disciples are there, right? His disciples are there, and those disciples and the people who are watching him, Jesus is going to use this opportunity not only to help the people at the banquet, have a good time. But remember, the sign is always there for a reason. Okay, there's always a reason for those signs. Because remember when John said why he wrote this book? He wrote it so that we may believe that Jesus is the promised Messiah, the Son of God. And by believing in him, we would have eternal life. So for the same reason, the disciples were observing Jesus, and we can see that they believed as a result. They really believed. Not just because they had a hunch, this guy is really something special, but they actually saw with their own eyes that Jesus could do these miracles. Okay, let's look at our worksheet. So let's just quickly see. The first episode was John 2 to 11. Okay, let's ask these questions. Where did this event happen? Can you remember? If you know the answer, type it in the stream chat. Where did it happen? Cana, right? Cana was a town in Galilee. Very good. What was that special occasion? That was a wedding. Okay, a very happy time. There was a problem. What was the problem? They had no more wine. Okay, and as you know, when there's no more wine, the party's over. Okay, we need wine to celebrate. It's a celebratory drink, right? Well, what did Jesus do about the problem? He solved the problem, right? He provided the wine. What was the people's reaction to what Jesus did? Verses 8, 10, and 11. All right, so let's quickly check it out. 8, 10. Well, first of all, we have the bridegroom. The bridegroom is really, really surprised. Okay, the bridegroom is surprised because normally when you have people drink a lot, maybe you bring the best wine first, but in this case, the bridegroom thought that the master of ceremonies, the main servant at that wedding, who was managing the whole party, arranged for the best wine to be kept until the end. So obviously he was really surprised. But then I think what I really want to draw your attention to is the fact that his disciples believed in him. All right. So this was the first of the signs through which Jesus revealed his glory, who he really is. Okay. All right. But now we have in front of us, we have a second episode, which we're going to contrast a little bit to show you that Jesus is both the Son of Man, because he cares about humanity, and he's also the Son of God, because he cares about the things of God. Okay? So, starting at verse 13, let's read together. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords, and he drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a market." His disciples remembered that it is written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." So this comes from Old Testament, especially from, it says in my footnote, it says that Psalm 69:9, basically it's a messianic thing. That means it's speaking about the coming Messiah. He would be very zealous for God's temple. Then the Jews responded to him, "What sign can you show us to prove your authority to do this? How can you do this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." They replied, "It had taken 46 years to build his temple, and you are going to raise it in 3 days?" But the temple he had spoken of was his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples recalled what he had said. Then they believed the scripture and the words that Jesus had spoken. All right, very, very interesting. We'll just finish it off now, and then we'll look at this in more detail. Now, while he was in Jerusalem at the Passover festival, many people saw the signs he was performing and believed in his name. Do you see a pattern here? Jesus does a miraculous sign, and people believe in him. But this is interesting. Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all people. This is that interesting. You know, not everyone was willing to follow Jesus for the right reasons. There were some people who would see Jesus as a means, as a vehicle to further their own agendas. Okay, and actually that was one of the disciples later. His name was Judas. he also was one of those people who followed Jesus, but probably for all the wrong reasons, because he had an agenda of his own. He wanted to be maybe like, Jesus' career manager. But of course, if Jesus is the Son of God, I don't think he needs a career manager. He did not need any testimony about mankind, for he knew what was in each person. Wow, isn't that interesting? Okay, so Jesus knows what is in each person. Well, that also means he knows you and I. He knows what's in our hearts too. Isn't that interesting? But first of all, let's just see that Jesus cared. Okay, Jesus cared. So it's good that he knows what's in our heart, because he would also care about our problems. We saw in the first part of this chapter, right, that Jesus really cared about people not having enough wine and not being able to complete their wedding in a honorable and respectful fashion. Okay, so he provided the wine. But here we also see something also very different. Jesus seems to be very angry about something. Where did the second event happen? Verses 13 to 14. Well, it happened in Jerusalem, right? Where there was a temple. So let's quickly switch screens. Yes, city name is Jerusalem, okay? So that was the capital of Israel, okay? And that's where the temple was. All right, what's the next question? What was the special occasion? Remember the name of that festival? Begins with letter P. Passover, okay? Passover. Passover was a special holiday when the Jewish people were celebrating their freedom. It's a long story. I hope to tell you another time. But basically, every year there would be lambs sacrificed, and the blood of the lambs was used in the original Passover to save the families from their firstborn being killed. Okay, so the angel of death would pass over the house, and this ensured the freedom of the Hebrew people. So this was the occasion of this particular event. What was the problem? Oh, let's take a look at this problem, guys. Verses 14. In the temple courts, Jesus found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves. Oh, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. Wow. So you might think yourself, well, what is Jesus against capitalism? Is Jesus he doesn't like trading? Is Jesus against people getting rich? I don't think that is particularly the case. Let me explain to you what this is all about, okay? Because every person in Israel on those days was required to, or every able-bodied man was required to go down to Jerusalem and offer sacrifices for the sake of, in order to atone for the sins, or, for the Passover, basically. He was a representative from each family. So people traveled from afar, and they were supposed to bring animals such as lamb, sheep, and if they were really poor, maybe they could sacrifice a dove, a smaller animal. There were other provisions made. But the thing about it was that the people who were checking these animals, they were really the gatekeepers. Do you know what I mean by gatekeepers? Because the animal was supposed to be, for example, the lamb for the Passover was supposed to be perfect, was supposed to be without blemish. And some people, I think they found a way to make extra profit. Just imagine you traveled with the lamb for maybe 2 or 3 days. You arrived in Jerusalem, you present it to the temple priests, and they are inspecting the lamb, and they are saying, well, you know what? This lamb is unacceptable. Look, it's too skinny. Or look, it has a blemish here. Oh, it looks like this lamb is, not perfect. We will not accept it here. So, but you know what? This is your lucky day, because we will buy it off you. And then if you just turn the corner, you will be able to buy a certified lamb, which is pre-inspected, and it's perfect, okay? So it is very possible that this kind of idea was leading to people being abused for many different reasons. And of course, another problem with changing the coins was that in the temple, people were, the Roman coins were considered to be unclean, and they would have to be exchanged for the temple coins. And that the process of exchanging money was also sometimes supposedly tampered with. So what is Jesus angry about here? What is he angry about, really? He's not angry about trading animals. What he's angry about is that these people are building up barriers, and they are preventing people to worship God in a free manner, how it was prescribed. They are making profit from people by using religious activities, because people have no other way of expressing their religious zeal towards God. They need to come to the temple and they need to offer these animals. However, that led to a lot of abuse, and people were cheated because of the fact that they needed to go there. And this was really a serious way to misrepresent what God's character, right? Because I'm pretty sure some people got really sick and tired, because they probably noticed, oh, listen, the lamb that I just sold as being not worthy to be sacrificed, my neighbor bought it 2 hours later, for a 10 times more expensive price, and he sacrificed that one. So what people found out is that they are being scammed. And what does that say about God? Is God also a scammer? So it really, really misrepresents God's love and his mercy and his provision for our sin through the death of an animal in a very serious way. And Jesus is very angry, and he drives all these people out. And then what is Jesus saying? He says, don't turn my Father's house into a market. Okay, so here Jesus is saying clearly that God is his Father, okay? Very, very interesting. And then there's this interesting exchange where, remember what was our definition of the temple? The temple was a place where God lives, right? Or God dwells. So Jesus, when they ask him why, who gives you the right to do this, right? Who gives you the right to do this? Who do you think you are, Jesus? How can you just, scatter all these, turn these tables over and drive people out? Well, Jesus says, destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days. So what Jesus is saying is that he's pointing to himself. And John is saying that he's explaining it to us from the point of view of, looking back. And he says, okay, after Jesus was really killed, 3 days later, he was raised from the dead. Okay, after he was raised from the dead, they finally understood what he meant. But for you, I just want you to understand that Jesus is saying, listen, I am God. God lives in me. I am here. Even if you try to destroy me, I will raise this temple in 3 days. Okay? So he's giving a prophecy about what will happen to him, which is very interesting, isn't it? Okay, let's take a look at our worksheet again, just very quickly. What did Jesus do about the problem? So people were being cheated and they were being scammed. Barriers were being put up between people and God. They could not worship God. And Jesus basically put an end to that. He drove all these people out. And he says, no, enough of this. Don't turn my Father's house into a market. And what was the people's reaction? Well, here is an interesting difference, okay? Remember the first episode? The disciples believed in him. And we have the same thing happening in verse 18. That after Jesus, no, not 18, later. After Jesus was risen again from the dead, the disciples believed. They understood what he meant. But not everyone believes, okay? Some people question Jesus. They question his authority. And it is very likely that some of those people were extremely displeased with what Jesus did. and they would not believe in him. And here's an interesting pattern. As we look forward, we're going to study this book from now on a little bit more. You will see that this will be a pattern. Jesus will teach something, then he will perform a miracle to show that he does have authority to teach these things. And then after the miracle is over, some people believe and follow him, and some people just say, oh, this is nonsense. He's some kind of a liar and a trickster, okay? And they don't believe in him. And guess what? A very similar thing happens today. Some people read the Bible and they see what Jesus has done and they believe, and other people reject him. So this is a very interesting thing that we see happen. Every time the Bible is preached and the gospel is preached, we see very similar thing happening. Okay, let's take a look at some questions. I think I said, so how did Jesus show that he was human? I think I already mentioned that. He was concerned about the couple that was getting married. They had a real need. He cared about their human need. But at the same time, Jesus showed how he's God, because he pointed to his own body as being the temple, and then he calls God his own Father. So just like you guys, what makes you a human? Well, I'm going to guess that you were born of human parents and you are sharing in your human parents' nature. You have a human nature because your parents were human. Well, for Jesus, it's the same. God is his Father, and that's why Jesus shares in his Father's divinity, or being God. All right, so here are some questions. First of all, let's think about the sign, the idea of sign. Why would Jesus perform miraculous sign? And maybe I'll ask you to type some comments here in the stream chat if you're watching this. What is the purpose of a sign? Just imagine you're walking down the street and there's a sign. Or a signature. Okay? So the sign is pointing to something, right? Pointing to some fact. If you see a washroom sign, well, the sign is not a washroom, but it points you to the washroom, okay? So in the same way, when we look at Jesus' miracles, we can focus and say, wow, that's amazing. Look at that. This man was blind, but now he can see. But the purpose of the sign is to show, hey, listen, yes, I performed a special miraculous sign, but what I mean by it is that look at me and see who I am. Do you believe me now? Do you believe who I am? Not just because I say so, but because I showed you a sign. All right. So that maybe answers the question number 2. Why do you think Jesus did miraculous signs? Well, I think he did it for the disciples to reassure them that they were not just following somebody, a traveling salesman who would maybe a con artist, but that they were actually wisely investing their time following Jesus, that this person is really, really special. He is the promised Messiah, okay? I think this is the main reason why Jesus wanted to reassure his disciples that they have chosen wisely to follow Jesus. So in the beginning, when the people saw Jesus' miraculous signs, what did they learn about Jesus? Well, I think that he was caring, right? Words like caring, compassionate comes to mind. Also powerful. I mean, how can you change water into wine? Just like that. But at the same time, we also see that Jesus was very serious about people being able to worship God without any hindrance, right? So when Jesus saw that people were being scammed at the temple, that they're being robbed, really, he got really upset about that. So I think we really need to learn from that, so that Jesus, he is breaking down every barrier between man and God. All right, that's his whole purpose. His whole purpose was to bring us together to God. And that if anyone tries to rebuild barriers, like sometimes some religions throughout the ages, throughout the history of Christianity. Religions found ways of building new barriers, new gates, and they may be some classes. They said, "Oh, we're going to call these people the priestly class, and we're going to give them the license to dispense God to you. Okay, if you follow these rules and so on." And I think Jesus might not be very happy about that, because his purpose was to break down every barrier between man and God, so that we would have access to God without any hindrance. Okay? So I think that, that's something we could keep in mind. That's what I learned about Jesus from this lesson. Well, but what about you? If you had seen Jesus' miracles, how do you think you would have felt? So just imagine, you're looking at this situation. You're one of the servants. You're one of the servants at the wedding, and you're serving wine, and you're worried because you're almost out. And now this woman is telling you, okay, just do whatever he tells you. And Jesus is telling you, okay, now take this wine and give it to the guests. And you're looking down into this stone jar, and you say, what? There was water here, and now there's wine. Wow. Okay, how would you react? I trust that you would say, wow, this is amazing. He is the Son of God. But maybe, yeah, thank you so much. One comment is, Shadowfeld says, I would be shocked. Yes, I would be really shocked. I would be asking, how did you do that? Okay. But, the point was to show that normal person cannot do that. A normal person cannot do that. That's the point. It's a miracle. If anybody could do that, it wouldn't be a miraculous sign. But then again, think about it. If you are a scammer at the temple, if you are trying to rob people of their money, and this guy comes in and he flips your table over and he says, get out of here, how would you have reacted? You might think, who gives him the right to do this? All right, so isn't it interesting? Remember in our first chapter, we learned that Jesus is the light, right? So sometimes when the light is shining in the places where we don't want the light to shine, we might feel like, oh no, you can shine the light here, but don't shine it here, because we feel uncomfortable with our behavior, with our intentions, with our thoughts. And this is what Jesus does to us, okay? And, we should, ideally, we should want that. We want God to show us where we are wrong so that we can fix those wrongs, right? And yet we can see that not everybody's reaction was like that. Okay, so what other things did you learn from Jesus, about Jesus from this chapter? Maybe you have some comments to make. That would be awesome to see them. I'm just thinking that these stories are so much deeper than what I just shared with you, and I don't want to drag it out forever, but I just wanted to go back just very quickly to the first story we read about the water being changed into wine. I just wanted to share this with you guys, because these water jars are not just ordinary jars. See, they were, and John is explaining it to us. He says, these were used by the Jews for ceremonial washing. Okay, so let me just explain that a little bit, because this is really, really interesting, guys. It's really interesting. So imagine if the Jewish people, they had many laws. For example, one of the laws was that they couldn't touch a dead body. If you touched a dead body, you would defile yourself. You would be unclean. And then you would have to actually go to Jerusalem and cleanse yourself. There would be special water there for you to cleanse yourself. Otherwise, you would be defiled. So what they had a system, because it's not practical to go to Jerusalem, all the time. It would be a long journey. So they had these water jars and the water taken from Jerusalem, and they had them spread all over Israel, where people, if they, by accident, they got defiled, or maybe they touched a dead body because they had to bury somebody, they would go to that place and they would ceremonially cleanse themselves, right, with the water. So what I want to propose to you guys, is that Jesus, this particular miracle is much more than turning water into wine. What Jesus is saying is that if you think about this stone jar being a dead body, naturally we are born dead in sins and in trespasses. Okay, we inherited the sin disease like a virus from our ancestors. And actually, we think we are so alive, full of life, but we don't have God's life in it. We are born without God's spirit, or our spirit is dead. Okay, so you may live like 75 years, or you may live 35 years, you might live, who knows? Life is fragile, you know, you might live 19 years. But we think we're living, but actually we are continuously dying, okay? So what this picture is here is that Jesus can turn this dead body into something alive. He turns water that is used for cleansing yourself from touching dead bodies, uncleansed, into wine, which is something to celebrate, something that is used for a wedding, something that is drank by a king. So it's a picture of our life. Jesus makes the difference in our life, okay? He comes in and he makes us alive from inside out. So on the outside, the jar still looks the same, all right? So if you meet some people who are Christians and they talk about the idea of, oh, I was born again, or I was born of the Spirit. Well, but they still look the same, right? So that's the point that Jesus here, I think, is making. You know, these stone jars were still made of stone. However, the content of it was miraculously transformed from a water used to cleanse, dead bodies into a water, not water, but wine, something that is completely of different nature, something that brings cheer and life and joy and flows out of us, okay? So I just want you to keep that picture in mind. Well, as we conclude this, I hope you found it interesting. I really hope that you can share the link to this video, connect to the channel as we are going to make our journey through this Gospel of John. Also, if you have any questions, please prepare them in advance or message me. There's all kinds of ways of you can get in touch with me. I also have a YouTube channel, so you might want to check that out, and make sure you hit that bell mark to get notifications of any future streams. I was just really overjoyed to be able to do this. Thank you for joining us today, and until the next time, stay blessed, and may God bless you wherever you are, whoever you are. I'd really like to get to know you over the next few months as we travel through the Gospel of John. Bye for now. Stay well. Be well.